They told me I don't belong here. The golden Georgia sunset bathes Cloverfield's quaint town square, where a black community activist stands tall on a makeshift stage, her voice fierce yet trembling with conviction. As she speaks of a dream, a community center for all, whispers ripple through the crowd, eyes narrow with judgment, and a few turn away, their murmurs sharp with prejudice. She's faced sidelong glances, cruel rumors, and veiled threats, all because of her skin and her unrelenting fight for justice. Yet her resolve burns brighter than the fading light. Will her love and truth shatter the town's deep-rooted biases? Stay tuned to find out how courage reshapes a community. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to catch our latest stories and share in the comments where you're watching from. What secrets will unravel and who will stand by her side? Keep watching to discover the heart of Cloverfield's transformation. The Cloverfield Town Hall hummed with restless anticipation, its high rafters catching the murmurs of a divided crowd. Sunlight poured through tall windows, painting golden streaks across scuffed floorboards, but the warmth couldn't pierce the tension hanging heavy in the air. At the heart of the room, a black woman in her 30s, poised with quiet strength, stood at a podium, her dark eyes blazing with conviction. "This community center isn't just walls and beams," she said, her voice a steady blend of fire and grace. "It's a promise, a place where every child, every family belongs, no matter their story." Her words echoed, bold and defiant, but the crowd's response was fractured. Some nodded, their expressions softening, while others shifted in their seats, their whispers sharp as thorns, their eyes lingering on her skin with unspoken judgment. In the back, a white architect in his 30s leaned against a pillar, his rugged face softened by curiosity. His flannel shirt was rolled up, revealing arms etched with the faint lines of pencil sketches from long days under the Georgia sun. He'd returned to Cloverfield to build something lasting, but her words were stirring something deeper in him. As she finished, their eyes met, a fleeting, curious glance. Not yet a spark, but a question. An older man, Mr. Jenkins, his face weathered by years and suspicion, rose, his voice slicing through the quiet. "We need a place for real Cloverfield folks, ma'am. You catch my drift?" His tone was polite, but his gaze fixed on her carried a weight that silenced the room. She smiled, unruffled, her voice steady. "I catch it, Mr. Jenkins, but every kid in this town is real. This center will show you." A few clapped, but others exchanged looks, their silence louder than any words. The architect stepped forward, his boots scuffing softly. "She's got it right," he said, his drawl calm but firm. "This project's for everyone. I'm here to make it happen." Mr. Jenkins sat, his lips tight, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud. As the meeting broke up, the activist lingered near the podium, gathering her notes. The architect approached, a blueprint tucked under his arm. "That was something," he said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "You've got a way of making people listen." She looked up, her smile cautious but warm. "Takes practice. I've been fighting for a seat at the table my whole life." He nodded, intrigued. "I came back to Cloverfield to build more than buildings. Maybe we're after the same thing." Their conversation was brief, but her quiet resilience and his earnest curiosity planted a seed, unnoticed by the townsfolk slipping out into the dusk. That evening, they sat across from each other in a booth at Bessie's BBQ joint, Cloverfield's beating heart, where the scent of smoked ribs and cornbread mingled with the twang of Johnny Cash from a jukebox. Bessie, a 50-something waitress with a quick wit and warm eyes, slid 2 glasses of sweet tea onto the table. "Y'all are shaking this town up," she teased, her voice a mix of mischief and pride. "Keep it up, and I'll need a bigger tip jar for all the gossip." The activist chuckled, her shoulders easing, but her gaze caught a nearby table. A group of locals, their faces etched with Cloverfield's history, stared openly, their whispers cutting through the music. "That's the one pushing that center," one muttered, his tone thick with disdain. "Don't know why she thinks she fits here," another hissed, her voice low but sharp. The activist's smile flickered, a shadow of hurt crossing her face, quickly masked as she stirred her tea. The architect caught the exchange, his jaw tightening. "Ignore them," he said, his green eyes steady. "They're scared of change." She met his gaze, her voice soft but resolute. I'm used to it. Doesn't make it sting less. He leaned forward, his tone earnest. You're doing something brave. I admire that. She tilted her head, studying him. Why'd you come back to Cloverfield? Most folks like you don't stick around. He hesitated, then grinned faintly. Wanted to build something that matters. Guess I'm learning what that really means. Bessie, refilling their glasses, chimed in. Folks here take time to warm up, but you two? You're stirring the pot right. Her words eased the tension, but the activist felt the weight of being an outsider in a town bound by tradition. As they left, the neon sign flickering behind them, the architect walked her to her car, gravel crunching underfoot. Keep fighting, he said, his voice low. You're not alone. She nodded, her heart lifting, but the town's whispers trailed them into the night. The next evening, they stepped into the Grand Bennett family home, its white columns and rose-lined porch, a symbol of Cloverfield's old money legacy. The dining room gleamed with polished silver and fine china, but the air was thick with unease. The architect's parents, Robert and Elizabeth, greeted them at the door. Robert, a retired judge in his 60s, stood rigid, his handshake firm but distant. Welcome, he said, his eyes scanning the activist's tailored blazer and confident stance. Elizabeth, her face lined with worry, offered a tight smile. It's nice to meet you, she said, her voice polite but strained, her hand hesitating before taking the activist's. The activist smiled warmly. Thank you for having me, she said, but she caught the subtle flinch in Elizabeth's grip, a silent marker of discomfort. Dinner unfolded like a tightrope walk. Robert sliced his steak, his voice measured. So, you work with those community groups? He asked, his pause before community groups, heavy with implication. The activist nodded, her tone even. Yes, I help families who've been pushed aside, folks who deserve a voice here. Robert's eyebrow arched, Elizabeth took a quick sip of wine, and the silence grew heavy. The architect leaned forward, his voice sharp. She's the reason this project has a soul, Dad. I came back because of people like her. Robert's jaw tightened. Cloverfield's got its ways, he said. His tone clipped. Change comes hard here. Elizabeth steered the conversation to the town festival, her voice overly bright, but her eyes avoided the activist, betraying her unease. The activist sat tall, her composure unshaken, but the weight of their judgment pressed against her. As the meal ended, she helped clear the table, her movements graceful despite the tension. Elizabeth, stacking plates, murmured, You're very driven. It's impressive. The words were kind but tinged with distance, acknowledging her strength yet marking her as different. Outside, under the porch light's soft glow, the architect walked her to the gate, his frustration clear. They're trapped in the past, he said, running a hand through his hair. But I see what you're fighting for. She looked at him, her eyes holding both resolve and a trace of vulnerability. It's not just them, she said softly. It's this whole town. But I've never backed down. They parted with a shared glance, not yet a promise, but a quiet understanding. The crickets sang, and Cloverfield's oak-lined streets seemed to watch, their shadows long and unyielding. The activist drove away, the architect's words echoing in her mind, a flicker of connection taking root in a town resistant to change. The activist drove away, the architect's words, I see what you're fighting for, echoing in her mind like a quiet promise, a flicker of hope against Cloverfield's unyielding shadows. The Georgia stars glittered above, but their light couldn't pierce the weight of the town's judgment, a weight she'd carried her whole life. As her car's taillights faded into the night, the hum of Cloverfield's oak-lined streets gave way to a new day, where secrets and whispers waited to unravel her resolve. At the community center's construction site, the morning sun bathed the skeletal framework in gold, hammers ringing against wood like a defiant heartbeat. The activist, her blazer swapped for a practical denim jacket, stood beside the architect, their heads bent over a blueprint. Her dark eyes traced the lines of the future center, a symbol of inclusion she'd poured her soul into. This courtyard could hold a stage for local bands, she said, her voice bright with vision. The architect nodded, his pencil sketching a curve. Maybe some bluegrass to get the town talking, he replied, a half smile tugging at his lips. Their easy rhythm was interrupted by a worker, his face grim, handing them a crumpled note. "Found this nailed to a beam," he said. The words scrawled in jagged ink read, "Stop this project or you'll regret it." The activist's jaw tightened, her gaze sweeping the site, catching a cluster of townsfolk watching from across the street, their whispers sharp in the morning air. The architect folded the note, his green eyes steady. "They're trying to scare us," he said, his voice low but firm. "We keep going." She nodded, but the note's threat lingered, a shadow over their shared dream. Later that day, they sat in a corner booth at Cloverfield's only coffee shop, its walls lined with faded photos of the town's past. The air smelled of roasted beans and tension as Carl Grayson, a wealthy landowner in his 50s, strode in, his polished boots clicking on the floor. His sharp suit and sharper gaze marked him as a man used to getting his way. "Well, well," he said, his voice smooth but venomous. "The architect and the activist, stirring up trouble." He leaned on their table, his eyes locking on her. "You don't belong here, pushing your ideas on our town." The word "our" cut deep, a veiled jab at her blackness. The coffee shop fell quiet, patrons' eyes darting their way. The architect stood, his frame taut. "This center's for everyone, Carl. You don't own Cloverfield." His voice was calm but edged with steel. She placed a hand on his arm, her voice steady. "We're building for the future, Mr. Grayson. You're welcome to join us." Carl's smirk faltered, but he leaned closer, his tone dropping. "Careful, ma'am. Folks here don't take kindly to outsiders meddling." The patrons' stares burned, some nodding with Carl, their silence a chorus of agreement. As he left, the activist exhaled, her fingers gripping her coffee mug. "He's not just talking," she said softly. "He's planning something." The architect met her gaze, his resolve mirroring hers. "Then we plan better." That night, alone in her small apartment, she sat at a worn desk, a family photo catching the dim glow of a lamp. Her mother's face stared back, unyielding, stirring a memory of a childhood day when a store clerk had refused them service. Her mother's hand squeezing hers tightly. "We don't bow, baby," her mother had whispered. The activist's eyes stung as she traced the photo, her resolve hardening. A knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found a letter slipped underneath, the handwriting childish but earnest. "Miss, you make me feel like I belong here. Thank you. Tommy, age 12. Her breath caught, tears welling as she read the words of a young black boy from Cloverfield. The letter was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of doubt, reminding her why she fought. Across town, the architect sat in the Cloverfield Historical Society's dimly lit archive, surrounded by dusty ledgers and yellowed newspapers. His fingers paused on a headline, "Local leader blocks black families from land purchase." The name, his grandfather's, hit like a punch. He leaned back, his heart heavy, and later stood before his grandfather's statue in the town square, its bronze face stern under the moonlight. "You built walls," he muttered, his voice a mix of anger and shame. "I'm here to tear them down." The statue offered no answer, but the weight of his family's past pressed against him, a silent challenge to his purpose. He thought of the activist, her courage in the face of Carl's venom, and felt a quiet resolve take root, not yet love, but a shared fight binding them closer. As dawn broke over Cloverfield, the community center's frame stood taller, a defiant silhouette against the sky. The activist and the architect would face new threats, their bond tested by secrets and rumors. But in that moment, the note, the letter, and the statue stood as markers of a battle just beginning, one they'd fight side by side. As dawn broke over Cloverfield, the community center's frame stood defiant against the sky, a beacon of hope amidst whispers of secrets and threats. The activist and the architect, bound by a shared resolve, faced a town poised to test their strength, their fight just beginning under the weight of a new day's challenges. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth as the activist arrived at the construction site, her denim jacket dusted with sawdust. The community center's walls were rising, each beam a step toward her vision of unity. But her steps faltered as she rounded a corner and saw it. Jagged red spray paint scarring the half-built wall. The words, "You don't belong," slashing across the wood like a wound. Workers gathered, their faces a mix of shock and unease. The architect joined her, his boots crunching on gravel, his green eyes darkening as he read the graffiti. "This is low," he muttered, his voice tight with anger. She stood frozen, her breath shallow, the words echoing a lifetime of being told she was out of place. A co-worker, Sarah, a woman in her 40s with a practical ponytail and hesitant eyes, approached. "I heard about the rumors," Sarah said, her voice low, almost apologetic. "Some folks say your family was tied to a shady land deal. I just want to be sure this project's clean." The activist's heart sank, the sting of doubt cutting deeper than the graffiti. "Those are lies," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "The truth will speak for itself." Sarah nodded, but her averted gaze betrayed her uncertainty, a subtle jab that mirrored the town's quiet prejudice. The activist turned to the wall, her fingers tracing the hateful words. "We can't let this stop us," she said, meeting the architect's gaze. He nodded, grabbing a paint can. "Then we fix it. Together." They worked side by side, brushes sweeping white paint over the graffiti, their movements synchronized in silent defiance. The sun climbed higher, casting its shadows long across the site. Workers joined in, their rollers smoothing over the scars, a quiet act of solidarity. As they finished, the wall gleamed fresh, a blank canvas for their dream. The architect wiped sweat from his brow, his voice soft. "You're stronger than they know." She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both resolve and weariness. "I've had to be," she said, her words carrying the weight of years spent fighting. Their hands brushed as they set down their brushes, a fleeting moment of connection that spoke louder than words, binding them in their shared purpose. Later that day, the architect stood in the grand living room of his family's home, its polished floors and ancestral portraits a stark contrast to the raw honesty of the construction site. His father, Robert, sat in a leather armchair, his stern face softened by a flicker of concern. "I heard about the vandalism," Robert said, his voice gruff. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest with this project." The architect paced, his frustration boiling. "And you think we should back down? Dad, you knew about Grandpa's past, how he kept families like hers out of Cloverfield. I'm not repeating that mistake." Robert's eyes dropped, a rare crack in his composure. "I was ashamed," he admitted, his voice low. "But seeing those kids at the site, black, white, playing together, it reminded me of you as a boy. You're doing something right." The architect paused, his anger softening. "Then help me," he said. Robert nodded slowly, a tentative step toward change. That evening, they found refuge at Bessie's BBQ joint, the familiar hum of the jukebox cutting through the tension. The aroma of smoked brisket and cornbread filled the air, but the stares of other patrons were sharper tonight, their whispers louder after the vandalism. "Heard they're digging up dirt on her," one muttered, his eyes flicking toward the activist. "Trouble follows her kind," another hissed, the word kind dripping with prejudice. Bessie, wiping down a counter, caught the exchange and sauntered over, her smile defiant. "Y'all keep stirring this town up," she said, sliding a plate of cornbread their way. "And I'm betting on you. This one's on me." She winked, her warmth a lifeline in the storm. The activist managed a laugh, but her fingers tightened around her glass, the weight of Cloverfield's judgment pressing harder. The architect leaned closer, his voice low. "They can whisper all they want. We're not backing down." She met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "You sure you're ready for this fight? It's not just paint on a wall." He grinned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "I'm learning what it means to stand up. You're a good teacher." Her smile softened, a rare moment of lightness breaking through her guard. Bessie, passing by, chuckled. "Y'all better keep that fire. Cloverfield's gonna need it." Her words lingered, a reminder that their fight was bigger than themselves, a spark of hope amidst the town's resistance. Back at the construction site, under a late afternoon sky streaked with pink, the activist and the architect gathered a small group of volunteers, including Tommy, the young black boy who'd written the letter. The center's frame loomed behind them, a symbol of their defiance. "They can tear at us," she said, her voice ringing clear, "but they can't break what we're building." Tommy, his eyes wide with admiration, nodded fiercely. "You make it feel possible," he said, his small voice carrying big dreams. The architect clapped a hand on Tommy's shoulder, his gaze meeting the activist's. "It is possible," he said, his words a quiet vow. The volunteers began unloading lumber, their laughter mixing with the hum of cicadas, a fragile but growing unity taking shape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Cloverfield in a warm glow, the activist and the architect stood side by side, their silhouettes framed against the center's rising walls. The vandalism, the rumors, the whispers. They were wounds but not fatal. Their shared fight had forged a bond, not yet love, but a partnership rooted in courage. The town's shadows loomed, but their resolve burned brighter, ready for the battles ahead. The sun dipped below Cloverfield's horizon, casting a warm glow over the community center's rising walls, where the activist and the architect stood united, their silhouettes a testament to their unyielding courage. The vandalism and rumors had scarred their path, but their shared resolve burned brighter, a flame ready to face the town's final test. Under a twilight sky streaked with gold, the community center gleamed, its freshly painted walls adorned with string lights that twinkled like stars. The grand opening buzzed with energy, the air alive with the twang of a bluegrass band strumming banjos and fiddles on a makeshift stage. Townsfolk milled about, some clutching lemonade, others eyeing the center with curiosity or skepticism. The activist, in a simple but elegant dress, stood at the edge of the stage, her dark eyes scanning the crowd. The architect, his flannel traded for a crisp button-down, stood beside her, his hand hovering near hers, a silent anchor. "This is it," she whispered, her voice steady but laced with nerves. "Our chance to show them what unity looks like." He nodded, his green eyes bright with determination. "We've built more than a building. Let's prove it." The crowd grew restless as Carl Grayson, the wealthy landowner, pushed through, his sharp suit cutting a stark contrast to the casual festival attire. Behind him, a small group of protesters hoisted signs. "Keep Cloverfield ours." Their chants rose, sharp and discordant against the music. "This ain't your town," one shouted, his words aimed at the activist, a veiled jab at her blackness that stung like a whip. The band faltered and a hush fell over the crowd. Carl stepped forward, his smirk cold. "This center's a mistake," he declared, his voice carrying over the square. "It's tearing Cloverfield apart." A bottle sailed from the protesters, shattering near the stage, glass glinting under the lights. Gas rippled through the crowd, and a child clung to her mother, eyes wide with fear. The activist stepped to the microphone, her hands trembling but her voice clear as a bell. "I've heard the whispers my whole life," she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd, unflinching. "That I don't belong because of my skin, my dreams, my fight. But this center isn't for me alone. It's for every child who's ever felt left out, every family who's ever been told they're not enough. It's for Cloverfield, all of us." Her words cut through the tension, and a few in the crowd nodded, their faces softening. The architect took her side, his voice steady but fierce. "My grandfather built walls to keep people like her out," he said, holding up a yellow newspaper clipping for all to see. "He was wrong. This center is our chance to right those wrongs, to build a future where we stand together." His eyes locked on Carl, daring him to challenge. The crowd murmured, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably, caught between old prejudices and new possibilities. The protesters faltered, their chants fading, but Carl's scowl deepened. "You're fools if you think this changes anything," he spat, turning to leave. The activist's voice rang out again. "It changes everything, Mr. Grayson, because we're not afraid anymore." The crowd erupted in applause, not unanimous but growing, a tide turning under the string lights. The bluegrass band struck up again, its melody weaving through the night, and the tension began to ease, replaced by a fragile hope. Children ran to the bounce house, their laughter mingling with the music, a sign that Cloverfield's heart was beginning to shift. As the event wound down, Mrs. Thompson, a 60-year-old widow with gray curls and a hesitant smile, approached the activist near the stage. Her hands fidgeted with a faded photo of her late husband. "I was wrong about you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "My husband came to Cloverfield as an outsider, and folks shunned him. I did the same to you, believing those rumors. I'm sorry. She extended the photo, her eyes glistening. He'd have loved this place. The activist took the photo, her throat tight, and grasped Mrs. Thompson's hand. Thank you, she whispered, their clasped hands a quiet bridge across years of division. The moment hung heavy with grace, a testament to the slow, hard-won change they were forging. Nearby, the architect stood with his father, Robert, whose stern face had softened under the glow of the lights. I saw those kids tonight, Robert said, his voice gruff but earnest. Black, white, laughing together. It's what you used to do, running through these fields. He paused, his eyes meeting his son's. I was wrong to doubt her. You're making me proud. The architect's chest tightened, and he clasped his father's shoulder. We're just getting started, Dad. Robert nodded, a rare smile breaking through, a step toward reconciliation that carried the weight of their family's past. Later, as the crowd thinned, the community center's courtyard transformed into an outdoor movie night. A large screen glowed under the moonlight, playing an animated film about a group of misfit friends finding their place. Children, black and white, sprawled on blankets, sharing popcorn, their giggles echoing across the grass. Tommy, the young boy who'd written the letter, sat front and center, his eyes wide with wonder. The activist and the architect stood at the edge, their shoulders brushing, the night air cool against their skin. Look at them, she said, her voice soft with awe. This is what we fought for. He turned to her, his gaze steady. It's what we're still fighting for. You've shown me what courage looks like. She smiled, her heart full, their bond a quiet strength forged through shared battles. Bessie, passing by with a tray of lemonade, caught their exchange and grinned. Y'all keep that fire burning, she called, her voice carrying the warmth of Cloverfield's better angels. This town's gonna need it. The activist laughed, a sound of hope cutting through the night. The screen flickered, casting light on the faces of children and families. Some who'd once whispered against her now sitting side by side. Not everyone had changed. Some faces in the crowd still held tight to old ways, but the seeds of unity were taking root. The architect's hand brushed hers, a silent vow to keep going. Under the Georgia moonlight, with bluegrass fading into the distance, Cloverfield stood at a crossroads, its future uncertain but alive with possibility. As the lights dim on Cloverfield's transformative journey, we hope the story of courage, love, and unity has touched your heart. The activist and the architect faced a town's prejudice with unwavering resolve, proving that truth and togetherness can shift even the stubbornest hearts. What did their fight spark in you? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this story resonates with you and where you're watching from. Your voice matters, just like theirs. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride through Cloverfield's crossroads. Your support keeps these stories alive, so don't forget to subscribe for more tales of hope and change. Until next time, keep the fire of courage burning, and we'll see you soon with another story that inspires. Stay connected, and let's keep building a world where everyone belongs.